Welcome to Justice Counts, the podcast that goes beyond the law to what's important to you. Equal justice for all is a guidepost for our nation, but how do we achieve that? Here are your hosts, writer-commentator Bob Gaddy and novelist-attorney Mark M. Bello.
Hey guys, thanks for joining Mark Bello and me on Justice Counts. Today we're with Dr. Pamela Gurley. Dr. Pam calls herself a fierce entrepreneur as an author, professional speaker, CEO, podcaster, professor, and businesswoman. She once told me that she thought about being a lawyer when she was starting out, but she didn't want to work that hard. Now, if she's doing all this stuff, I think she failed at that goal. Anyway, she says she's a busy and empowered boss lady working every day to change how Black women are perceived. Well, we'll find out more about that a little bit. In 2021, Dr. Pam was awarded the RadioOne EmpowerHER Empowering Motivation Award for her commitment to uplifting others. She's a retired U.S. Army vet, holds a BA in psychology, a master's in health service administration, and a doctorate in management. Dr. Pam has written several books focused on empowering Black women, and in May will kick off a new book tour promoting a new children's book series written for Black kids. She's also our newest columnist on the notfakenews.biz blog site, and we're happy to have her. Mark, say hello to Dr. Pam.
Dr. Pam, I guess we're now colleagues. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
I keep finding all these great writers by doing podcasts.
One of the important reasons I wanted to have you on Justice Counts is because Bob kind of joked about it off air and then a little bit just now about being a lawyer or not being a lawyer. I don't believe the word justice applies just to the law. And I've made that pretty clear in many of the previous podcasts we've done. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you're a perfect example, in my opinion, of injustice as it plays out in real life. You have a primary mission, as I understand it, of empowering, for lack of a better way to say it, Black women who you believe have been a victim of injustice in society in general. It should be no surprise to anyone who listens to my podcast or reads my books that I believe the country needs social justice reform. The need for reform bumps up against your life experiences on two fronts. You're Black and you're a woman. Can you talk about your own experiences and what led you to become what I'm going to call an entrepreneur for change?
Yeah, that's so multi-layered for me. And I worked for the federal government for 14 years. I've worked for a State Department. I've worked for Merit Systems Protection Board. I've worked for Department of Defense. I'm prior service Army. My experience has differed in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways they stayed the same when it came to thinking that I was kind of like on the low end of the totem pole. And I'll give an example, and this is one of the main reasons why I advocate for Black women. I'm a Black woman, so I can only really speak from my experience growing up and as a working professional. When I worked for State Department, when I first got there, I was in my doctoral program. I was in the last year, and somebody asked me, "Hey, what are you going to be doing this weekend?" And I said, "Oh, I have a paper to write. I'll be studying." And the first thing they came out, they said, "Oh, so you're getting your bachelor's?" And I said, "Oh, no, and I was cut off. And they said, "Oh, you're getting your master's." And I was like, "No, I'm not." Before I can even say anything else, he said, "Oh, so you're getting a certificate." To me, and maybe it was just me at the time, but the fact that I'm a Black woman, you didn't choose doctorate. You reverted all the way back to a certificate.
I thought they were going to say high school.
No, but that was the unique thing. And when I said, "Oh no, I'm getting my doctorate," and they said, "Oh, that's impressive," as if the expectation of a Black woman cannot go and achieve such a high level degree.
Pam, that's just got to be hard to live with that kind of stuff all the time. It just must.
Our people are shocked often. And sometimes I introduce myself as Pam, and then when I give them my business card, and my business card is formal, because one thing I always say, I'm never Miss or Mrs. or anything, that I earned that doctorate title, but I don't wear it. I don't wear it on my sleeve. So when I do introduce myself, I'm often, "Oh, I'm Pam." I exchange cards and they look at it. It's like, "Oh, you have your doctorate," as if it's a shock and awe. Like, "Oh, what do you I can't believe you went that high." And so there's a lot of people and a lot of women like me of color or minorities that have doctorate degrees. Yes, it's a small pool in percentage, but we are out there. And so I think the mindset needs to shift for society, that we have opportunities that we take advantage of, or we push to have, not, to change that status quo, to change that stereotype.
Yeah, these are just some of the stereotypes that you've got to live with all the time, right?
Yeah. That in the what are you mixed with? I get that one a lot too. What are you mixed with? And I although I just feel like that's a question that should not really exist anymore. The United States, especially, and this world, is a cultural melting pot. I don't think people should have to define or choose who they are. I think people should just let people be, and stop looking at somebody's features and saying, "I don't think you're this," or "I don't think you are that," or "You're not Black enough," or "You're not white enough." "Oh, you talk awfully proper to be a Black woman." To me, it's what you are suggesting Black to be that is the problem.
I agree with that. The question I have, though, as I heard you explain it, is, and this may come out wrong, and I apologize if it does, at what level is that a legitimate question? Do you have a chip on your shoulder, for instance, versus that being a legitimate question? And what I mean by that isn't a question about being a woman or being Black. It might just be being young. No, for instance, if I tell somebody I'm a lawyer, the way I look now, old, gray-haired, I was prematurely gray, by the way, so telling people I was a lawyer seemed to be something that they expected me to say. I'm wondering if it's just perhaps a youth thing rather than a Black thing or a female thing. I don't know. I don't know that people necessarily mean harm by being surprised, and I'm wondering what you think about that.
So, I definitely don't have a chip, but people do look at physical features, especially, "Can I touch it?" So that answers your question. So it's not just what are you mixed with? It's they're stereotyping features that I have with not just being Black. You have to be mixed with something.
I have to stop you a second, because this is not a video recording. It's going to be an audio recording. She touched your hair. I want everybody to know.
Oh, okay.
The hair on her head. So when she said, "Can I touch it?" she was talking about the hair on her head.
But people do want to touch it, and that's problematic. So that lets me know what you are doing is that you are categorizing or stereotyping how I look, with suggesting that Black can't be that.
I don't disagree. It's not my experience, as you pointed out. I just, from the standpoint of someone asking you that question and being impressed, it could be looked at as somebody asking you that question and being impressed, rather than taking it in a negative way. And that's all I'm pointing out.
Oh yeah, I mean, but it's a legitimate question. However, I still think that it's a It's not a necessary question that you should have to ask anyone. Second, it's just like saying, oh, you're so pretty for a Black girl, or your hair is pretty to be a Black girl.
That's different.
That is different.
But you hear the context. But you hear the context is what I'm saying. And that context is exactly how I am asked.
Yeah, and you know what? She made the point, Mark, that it wasn't that they were surprised. They didn't go from master's to doctorate. They didn't say, oh, so you have your doctorate. They went to say, oh, it's a certificate, right?
I agree.
That tells you something.
I agree.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree. What's going through my head, is being surprised that Spud Webb is a basketball player. Because he's 5'4". He's 5'4". Why would he be a basketball player?
He would shock people if he said, "Oh, I'm a professional basketball player." People would look, and just because he doesn't meet the typical look of a basketball player.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, it's just like Jose Altuve. I mean, what's he, 5'5", and he hits home runs.
Same thing. I don't necessarily, and my point is, I don't necessarily think that being surprised, in the context that we're discussing, is, for lack of a better word, offensive.
Okay.
But again, it would be like, if I said to somebody, I'm an Olympic athlete, they would be surprised. I would imagine.
Well, shocked.
But anyway, we'll move on.
Yeah, let's move on. You know what? I wanted to talk about this controversy that's taken place over President Biden pledging to nominate a Black woman to succeed Justice Stephen Breyer. How do you feel about that, Dr. Pam? And what's your reaction to Republicans who say that's nothing more than affirmative action at the highest level?
So I guess my question would be to you, gentlemen, to come back and just to give you perspective. What's the difference between white privilege and affirmative action? That's the way I look at it when that question is posed. It's like, okay, I understand affirmative action, but I've also been very in the present of white privilege. So if affirmative action will get, is they're saying, oh, you're letting Black people have these roles because of affirmative action. White men and women, especially white men, have been getting roles because of white privilege, because of white dominance in society, because that's how it's the government. The government for the longest time, especially at the senior executive level, was almost always predominantly white men.
You're suggesting, and I agree with you, that white privilege is affirmative action.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what when you ask the question, with the Republicans feeling like that's nothing more than affirmative action, my thought on that is, what's the difference between affirmative action and white privilege?
There's no difference, A, and B, it's not limited to politics, government, or any limited aspect of life. It permeates life. Bob and I have had the so-called privilege, unquote, quote unquote, of growing up white. You walk in looking for a job, and you don't walk in with two strikes. One of the thoughts I had when I listened to the earlier podcast that you did with Bob and looked at your bio is this whole two-strike phenomenon. I look at you and I see somebody who walks into almost anything she tries to do as someone walking in with two strikes. You have to convince somebody to hire you. You have to convince somebody to educate you. You have to convince somebody to like you as a person, rather than look at you as a, quote, Black person. And on top of that, as a Black woman. What should you be doing with your life other than being Dr. Pam? White society has decided that for you long ago. And you bucked those trends, and I admire you for that. I don't think it should be that way, but that's the way it is, and that's your point, right?
Yes, exactly. And so my feeling is that this is my issue, and I think I've talked about it before with them saying, oh, push for this diversity and inclusiveness. Just because you allow people in, if you don't give them a voice, it's nothing but a face. It's like, oh, let me just show people that I can have a diverse. If your diverse workforce is lacking equity, equal pay, then what is it? You don't have anything. You basically wasted, tax dollars just to let us in and make money. But people don't just want to just walk into a place and make money. A lot of people want to be able to walk in and make change.
It is, in my opinion, the biggest injustice in society. That's why I wanted you on the show. Justice counts means more than justice as it applies to the legal system. I want to expand on Bob's question, though. The question that people are asking is not people of color necessarily, but the Ted Cruzes of the world, is shouldn't he be looking for the best candidate rather than a candidate of a particular race or a particular gender? I think you kind of touched on that issue, but and I have my own opinions about it if you want to hear them, but I want to hear your opinion on that question.
So my opinion on it here again, I believe that all things should be fair, but the question is, how do you really make it fair? How do you know what's happening is fair and not white privilege, not affirmative action? How do you really know? But if you have two candidates, nobody's saying just because he put somebody up and say, yes, I'm going to nominate a Black woman. If she meets the criteria that matches anyone else and she's selected, I am all for it. I don't consider myself Democrat or Republican. I feel like I'm going to vote for whoever is going to do best for myself, for the elderly, for children, people who are really want to be active in advocating and putting in place laws that's going to protect American citizens. I don't care what color you are. But what I can do for myself is advocate for what's important for people of color, because I'm a woman of color. I've never been white. So how can I advocate for white? And I think, Bob, you and I had this conversation and why I write books for my community, but I also write books so that other communities can understand what we need. So when I look at the Ted Cruzes of the world that's saying, oh, it's just affirmative action, I think that they also need to say, okay, how can we have something that's more accountable? What is it weighed up against? Is it just you're just picking someone because she's a Black woman, or are you picking someone that actually qualifies? So if she qualifies, why not? Why shouldn't he just, not be able to nominate her based on, because of what he chooses? It's his right, and I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to diversify to just say, you know what, we have enough of white privilege that's going on, because it's too easy to pick a white man. I mean, he could pick someone who's Hispanic, who's Asian, but his choice is to pick a Black woman.
I would also suggest to you that in addition to what you just said, that it's a red herring argument. When Ted Cruz says what he says, he's talking about a long line of lawyers who pre-existed someone your age who has achieved the level of educational success that you've achieved. There just aren't that many qualified Black women out there. And it's easy for him to say there are more qualified white men because they've been around longer in those the so-called qualified positions.
Correct.
So I agree with you. The women that are being bandied about as choices are well qualified, and that's quite enough considering that the pool of candidates in that category is such a small pool. And that's not the fault of those candidates. Mm-hmm. That's the problem with the arguments of a Ted Cruz. That's like saying, do you have a quota to let certain ethnic groups into a school or into an apartment complex or into a neighborhood? All of those quotas are 30s, 40s, and 50s tools to discriminate against Black people. Mm-hmm. And to hearken back to that, as a lawyer, to really dumb this down pisses me off. It shouldn't even be a question. Why couldn't we ask when Roberts got nominated and approved? Why are you nominating and approving a white guy?
Well, even
Nobody
when
asked
Trump
that
nominated, when Trump nominated the white woman to when he was in office, nobody said anything about that, and she went against a whole lot of things that people felt. They tried to block it, but now it's a problem that Biden wants to select a black woman. But nobody was saying, oh, it's affirmative action, it's anything else like that, because they couldn't. They just opened the door and allowed Trump to make the decision on the person that he wanted.
Well, these Republicans, these right-wing nutcase Republicans like Cruz and Trump, they're now claiming that white men are victims of racism, and I just think that is the biggest joke in the universe. There's a big story in the Washington Post about that the other day, and I mean, that's just incredible to me, for crying out loud.
What was the quote? If you're a white guy, tough luck.
Yeah, he said, if you're a white guy, tough luck when it comes
what a joke.
Yeah, but beyond that, I mean, they're complaining about this in every way, and it just, to me, it's just incredible. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Pam, what you wrote a really good piece, your first piece for nonfakenews.biz, on the potential nomination of a black woman to the Supreme Court. And I had asked you to kind of focus on the implications of that for young black women going forward. Could you talk about that a little bit? So,
the implications going forward with that is that you have someone who is breaking another barrier for the black race, especially women. And I'm not saying the other thing is, I will say, I try to advocate for the black community as a whole. And I know, but my focus is always on black women, but only because a lot of times when you see black women in media, she's being picked apart, she's being ridiculed. I don't care how far up she's gone. And I'll give an example on why I think this is just as important. I look at during the presidential race before, and every time there was a debate with Kamala Harris, nobody cared what she said. It was always focused on how she moved her head, if she, or how she spoke, what she wore. So people missed the important parts of what she had to say. When Obama was in the White House, she was picked apart too. They had all kinds of name callings for her. They didn't focus on all the important things she was doing for children eating healthy, for literacy, for all the dynamic things that she did. No, her focus was on what she had on. Oh, she didn't have on sleeves. It's as if black women are always picked apart. And so when I look at, this a new person that's going to come in and fill those shoes as a black woman, I want there to be a change in how other young black girls can see that. And hopefully her transition in won't be within the same demeanor of how these other ladies have come in. But it still shines, huh?
You do feel that that's more of a woman thing than a black thing, though, correct? Because this applies to Hillary Clinton. It even applies to Ivanka Trump. Everybody was more interested in what they looked like and what they were wearing, and is Hillary female enough? She got that all the time.
But I would say this, and that's
I think it's more female than it is a black thing with Kamala.
To an extent, there's some truth to that, and of course, women all the way around. I would say there needs to be a shift in how women are seen, but specifically with black women. If you look at media, they're mostly drama filled, almost everything. There's not a lot of positive, displays for representation. for young Black girls. If you look at reality TV, yes, I'm not saying that they don't have, like, what is it, the Real Housewives of Salt Lake, that fight and all of those things, but it's not as damaging as it is for Black women, because they already hold these Black women and say, oh, she acts like that anyway. They're aggressive, they're loud, they're all of these things, and it's stereotypical, whether they're successful or not. People now unfortunately equate social media influencing as successful when they're getting paid. And this is what little kids are seeing. So they just assume, oh, I want to be an influencer, I want to do this. And I'm not saying to anybody that social media is not a real job, but that's too easy of work. It's just, if you want to make content, because where's the real impact? And I think that's what people miss. You going online, setting things up to get likes. What does that say about our society and the way that we are moving? But then also we're forgetting about the impact that it's going to have on our children. There's also, you look at Black women who are getting so much plastic surgery for things that they already had, just want to, I don't know, compete with the white women that are now getting it as well. To me, it's just really, really crazy.
From the standpoint of your grandmother, your mother, and what they experience versus what you experience. I mean, when I'm 69 years old. Bob's even older than that. I don't know how old you are, Dr. Pam.
I'm 46.
So you're considerably younger than we are. When I was growing up, there were no Black dolls. There were no Black books. There were no Black kids in my class. There were no Black role models. In Hollywood, Black people were servants and housekeepers. Amos and Andy and Little Black Sambo were essentially the standard of either television or book reading. Not so today, but we experience a whole different undercurrent of inequality. And two specific issues underscore that: our criminal justice system, mm-hmm. and our access to government, our voting rights. Can you comment on those two issues as they relate to your advocacy?
Yeah, and because it'll also go back to Bob's previous question with why it's important to have, to have this Black woman to come in and take such a seat. One, I feel all the way around, in order to really have true justice, you have to have seats at the table who understands what's going on in their communities. This is why I also tell people all the time, if your sole focus is on the presidential election, you are sadly mistaken. Right now in November, people need to be focusing on the House and the Senate and how many seats are available and who is trying to fill them. Because the more you diversify the playing field, the more voices you have that differ from one another. So to me, one, I have an issue with the Voting Rights Act anyhow, because a lot of these laws that are still in place need to be gone because they was never meant to protect other class of people, either immigrants or Black people, slaves. And if you go and look, some of them still have the same words that was used back in slavery because they've never really changed this law. They might have kicked the can down and say, well, we're going to just give them this much more time to vote. It should have been eliminated. It should never be on the books. And there's a lot of laws that are out there right now that need to be done away with because it was never made for a society that has been so transformative.
Well, then in the states around the country, the red states, they're even trying to make things worse. And Congress hasn't done a thing about it. And that's those two voting reform bills that were passed by the House are just sitting in the Senate because they can't get them through.
And to expand your call to action, the call to action ought to be to local politics as well.
Exactly.
That's where this is playing out. They're creating districts that a Black woman, for instance, cannot possibly win.
What they've done is in many states, including the one I live in, South Carolina, they are jerry-rigging district lines in order to favor incumbents. Here in South Carolina, most incumbents are Republican.
And white.
It's the Republican state legislators are making these decisions. Some states require a commission to do that, a bipartisan commission, but not so in South Carolina and in many other states where the state legislature runs the redistricting process. The ironic thing is that sometimes they draw these lines to protect minority or Democratic district. They don't want to have
the problem is everybody does it, right?
Yeah, they don't want to. They don't want to have it even in the Republican states. If there is one district out of say 10 in the state where a Democrat is in office, they will protect that guy. Either Republicans will protect that guy because they don't want to clutter up a neighboring Republicans district with Democratic voters. And so it's all protect your butt by incumbents. And the Democrats do it too in Democratic controlled states. I won't say they don't, because they do. The fair thing would be to have a commission, a bipartisan commission, to come up with these district lines. They need to be changed based on the census because the population shifts and changes. And that's the purpose of it. But it's just a political sham. And what's going on right now, because of the fact that Republicans control more state legislatures than Democrats do, those legislative districts are solidified for Republicans to make them even stronger. And it means that, and that affects everything. It affects judicial appointments. It affects legislative initiatives at the state level.
Bob, if you think about it, it's an extension of Dr. Pam's white privilege argument.
Oh, it is.
If all of the old legislatures who are creating these gerrymandered states are people of privilege, of white privilege, then you're going to get the same old thing over and over and over again.
But the thing is,
you can't break the cycle.
No, that's true. But all of this really, I mean, Dr. Pam's point that local is most important is really true, because here in this state, in South Carolina, for example, there are a half a dozen bills that have been proposed. I don't know if there's a half a dozen, several bills that have been proposed that would make it impossible for a woman to have a legal abortion in the state. And those bills are probably going to pass because the legislature has been stacked to support the conservative point of view. And you can take that issue, or you can take any other social issue that you want, minimum wage. Another big one is, of course, is what can be taught in schools.
Yeah, and education cuts, funding.
Cuts. Yeah, funding.
Mm-hmm. Education funding.
But how about critical race theory, and the big red? That's a red. Talk about a red herring. I mean, that's not even taught in public schools. Yet school boards are going crazy over the issue, and the right wingers are making it a huge political point in their campaigns. In the state, for example, Republican Representative Tom Rice, voted to impeach President Trump and called him out for his role in the insurrection. He's being primaried with Trump supporting a Republican state legislator who is a supporter of all of these right-wing crazy bills that are before the state legislature. There's a good chance that he could win that nomination, although Rice is far outraised him in terms of fundraising. Nevertheless, Trump's endorsement carries a lot of weight.
You know, your experience as an old white Democrat in South Carolina, multiply that by 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, I don't know, and you've got Dr. Pam's experience as a young black woman.
Yeah.
I mean, as frustrating as it is, Bob, for us white Democrats to watch this play out in real time.
Yeah.
Consider the plight of the black woman.
I know. You know what? That is the reason why I am so happy to have Dr. Pam and some other really, really bright, intelligent, forceful black women be on my Lean to the Left show. And
that's also why that's also why I wanted to have her on the show.
And so happy to have you, Dr. Pam, on Not Fake News, Stop Biz.
Oh, thank you. You know what I'm going to write about now for my next piece?
What?
You know, I have to write about, what Tom Cruise say about the affirmative action.
Yeah.
Or not Ted Cruz. Tom Cruise.
Ted Cruz.
I know Tom Cruise. Ted Cruz. What Ted Cruz said about the affirmative action. I definitely want to write about the difference between and have a great viewpoint of affirmative action versus white privilege.
That's good.
I'd love to write about that.
Yeah.
I am going to write about that.
I have a question for you. Should we be colorblind or color-minded? You
should be color-minded. Because when people say often, I don't see black when I see you, I'm thinking, what are you looking at? Because you can't miss it. You can't miss it at all. But if you're always color-minded, then you recognize that we don't look the same, but we don't have to. We're not supposed to. I think the more differences we have, it's like having multiple personalities. Would you want somebody looking like you all the time? Imagine being a twin, an identical twin. It's like you never have your own identity. And some of them love it. And some of them just say, dang, at some point, I just wish I can have something different. Don't dress me like her because I want something to be different. Don't dress me like him because I just want something different. I want to look not like someone else. And that should be fine. So I look at being color-minded in that same aspect. Because you're very open to say, I see you as someone else who's not the same complexion as me, shade as me, and even white people have multiple shades. It's like the rainbow. You go from those who cannot tan at all to someone who is darker than me.
I have two very important issues that I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
I listened to your podcast with Bob, and you kind of called out Joe Biden regarding what he's done for the black community. And while I understood your point, my fear is that the response to that is you get a Donald Trump. I'm like flabbergasted that the same country can elect a Barack Obama and a Donald Trump. It just blows my mind.
But this country elected Donald Trump because of the election of Barack Obama.
I agree with that, but Biden/Obama is so much better than anything that spelled Trump.
Oh, yes.
That I fear that criticizing a Biden gets you right-minded people thinking, well, if that's how she feels, then I guess Trump's not so bad. I don't want good people on both sides. I don't want there's my African American. I don't want seems to me you have nothing to lose, so why don't you give me a try? I don't want that. And I realize I'm not a black man or a black woman, but I feel qualified to say that. I don't want that. I don't want to go back to that. That's point one. Point two is you made a point about being a black woman and advocating for black women. Do you feel that somebody like me, for instance, can't also advocate for black women?
Oh, you certainly
That seems to
can.
be what you said.
No, what I tell people is I write because if you advocate, what are you advocating? How do you, unless me and you have a conversation about what I need and what the community needs and how it's impacting little black and brown children, how it's impacting, I mean, no matter what, you as a white man, you can advocate for what you want, but you have to have a basis on what you are advocating for and against, and because it has to have meaning. And if you're not dialoguing with someone like me or any other minority race, how can you really say what I need unless you're saying, well, if I was them, this is what I want, but it doesn't make it accurate. That's what I was trying to say. Second, let me address this too. When I said that Biden hadn't done enough, in the same conversation is that what I feel as though people need to stop holding the president accountable for everything. And this is why we need to be looking at the real change makers, and that's in Congress. The same thing when they said Barack Obama didn't do enough. The same, Trump, I don't know how he got through half the things he got. He was just like willy-nilly. And I just thought to myself, when did politics become a reality TV? It was like a reality TV show gone bad. But when you look at real politicians, not actors, you have to understand the political people and the power of the purse. And that is not sitting in the White House. That's sitting on the Hill. That's the statement that I was making when I said Biden hasn't done enough. I also said there were times Barack Obama didn't do enough. It's no fault of theirs or their presidencies, because we have to look at where the source of the problem really starts. It starts at the Hill. It starts at our local governments. And that's when me and Bob was talking. I said, people need to start looking at their governors, their city councilmen. Look at who's affecting your actual community, your local community, your state government, and then your federal government. The presidency is one thing, but they are not the power that hold the purse. The president, I spent 14 years in government budgeting, and I was going to the Hill. My budget rolled into the president's budget. The president's budget goes to the Hill. And guess what? It's either marked up, it's reduced. They say, we're not giving you this, we're not giving you that. So people need to understand that when laws are not passed in the times that they want, or why aren't they pushing for this? Because things sit in Congress for the longest time, and then they push what they want. They push their agenda faster than they would the president's agenda. That's what I want people to really understand. So I'm not saying that I want another Trump, by no means. I would like another, but I do want people to focus that we're holding the president accountable for something that he cannot always control. But what we can control is looking at this coming election in November, at all the seats that's up, and find out who's going to support your agenda. And that's who you should be putting in office, or wanting to put in office.
Tell us about your children's books that you're working on, and about the book tour you have planned coming up.
After she does that, I want to make a little announcement about the same topic.
Okay. So yes, I am a big proponent of childhood literacy. I have a Brown Girl and Brown Boy book series that, although it's very multicultural with all of the illustrations, it's predominantly giving representation and cultural stories and ways to develop children from the inside to the outside. And I can only relate from being a young Black girl myself who has curly hair and had to go a long time trying to figure out who I was. So it's teaching kids how to see themselves and be around others who don't look like them, but still be able to gain and grow that confidence to grow up and be anything that they want to be. I started putting those books out last year, May. The third edition that's coming out May 22nd is called Brown Girl and Brown Boy Be Well. The first one was Brown Girl Break Barriers, Brown Boy Break Barriers, Brown Boy Be Social, and Brown Girl Be Social. My books are my books are in English, French, and Spanish, because I think that cultural diversity goes beyond skin color. Representation goes beyond skin color. We really have to look at how, just because the color of our skin says one thing, it doesn't mean our culture speaks the same. So I wanted to make sure that I would be able to give parents here in America, that's a cultural melting pot, an opportunity to have reading time with their kids. I do have a kids red carpet book signing that's kicking off in Jackson, Mississippi in May, the second weekend in May. I will be in Jackson, Mississippi, Chicago, Illinois, Austin, Texas, and Orlando, Florida. It's a lot of fun. I'm also looking for sponsorship, because I think it's important now more than ever that kids be able to celebrate literacy in the best way possible. And I want to be able to offer free books and everything else that I've always offered as a part of it. Free popcorn, candy, there's games, there's face painting, there's a lot of things, kids swag bags. So I think it's important for literacy for all children.
Well, the most important part of what you just said, aside from that you wrote these important books, is that you're kicking off the tour in Jackson, Mississippi.
Yes.
Can you imagine kicking off the tour in Jackson, Mississippi in 1950?
Well, probably not. It's probably not going to fly.
That would not have been possible. So there has been. It's not all gloom and doom. It's not all bad news. There has been some progress. The point I wanted to make. And the reason I wanted you to discuss your children's books is that I just wrote my first children's book, and it's called Happy Jack, Sad Jack. It's about racial bullying. It's about a biracial kid who is bullied because he looks different than the other kids in the school. It kind of runs contrary to what you said, though. It's not my experience. I wasn't I certainly wasn't a biracial kid. I also wrote a book that I haven't published yet called The Smallest Kid in the Class, which is my experience. I was always the littlest guy in school and picked on because of it, and I wrote a book about it.
I could have written a book about that too, because that would be.
But
yeah, me too.
This particular book is a story in rhyme about racial bullying. Which I think is an important topic that is not frequently written about.
Mark,
I agree.
When is that coming out, Mark?
It's sort of out now. I'm having a problem. Maybe Dr. Pam can help me. I'm having a problem getting it properly formatted for the Amazon platform.
Oh yeah, I can definitely help you with that.
I also have a new novel that I just finished that's going to come out in, I think, April, called "You Have a Right to Remain Silent." So those are my two little announcements.
Okay, well, I want to thank you guys. I mean, Pam, that was great. Dr. Pam, I appreciate you joining us today on Justice Counts. It was really an informative and fascinating conversation. And Mark Bello and I are grateful that you took the time to be with us. So thank you, everyone, for listening, too. Now, if you haven't done so already, you've got to check out Mark's Rip from the Headlines legal thrillers. They're all available on Amazon and other major online booksellers. You know, he's got quite the hero in this guy, attorney Zachary Blake, who fights for justice on all fronts. His books, if I need a lawyer, he's the guy I'd want, by the way. His books are Betrayal of Faith, Betrayal of Justice, Betrayal in Blue, Betrayal in Black, Betrayal High, and Supreme Betrayal, and just out, Betrayal at the Border. And you just heard Mark say he's got a new one about ready to be published. He's working on it. So for more information, just check markmbello.com. Until next time, this is Bob Gaddy for Mark Bello signing off from Justice County.